We accept your apologies, Deputy Mayor. So let's get straight into the meeting. And the first thing to do is to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, which was way back in February, 10th of February.
So before we proceed, can we just go around the room? And then Christine has just joined us online as well.
Yeah, she's one of the consultants.
Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The big tick needs to go to the staff, and it'd be great if some of this is relayed back to the staff, you know, as a sort of thank you, and they're doing a great job as well.
Would you like to add that into a motion that you might want to move, Councillor Barber?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I'll do that. I'll put it into a council motion for the next meeting or the one after.
We can do that now. We have a recommendation that the customer satisfaction survey findings be received. That's point 1. Would you like to add a point 2 in there that we congratulate the...
Go on, so...
Christine and James, you could leave if you'd like to.
Christine, yes, Christine and James, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. So we could do something. Well, would you like to put your own words there, Stephen, about?
I was just thinking, and we would like to acknowledge the positive contribution of the staff towards these good results.
Good.
Yep.
That
Can
sounds
we actually
lovely.
go further and say
Yep.
we recognise this result could not have been achieved without
Agreed, Ian. That's much better.
the constant input from council staff.
Yeah.
And then we go on and say, we record our appreciation.
Yes, very good. So that's moved by Councillor Barber. Councillor Mutton, would you like to second that?
I'll second it.
And seconded by Councillor Mutton. Show of hands. Good. That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We all should be very happy with that one.
Madam Mayor,
Yep.
I know that you've just dealt with it. I would like to make a comment back. I acknowledge and thank the councillors for their comments on council staff. I'd just point out, and I wasn't here 4 years ago, but the one thing that from my introduction to council and the background that I was provided, I would suggest that part of the positive result goes towards the stability of the council and how the council is perceived in the media. And I think that's it's a very important lesson. I mean, we know there was a commission of inquiry back in 2016-17 that was all happening around the time of the last survey. So I have no doubt as well that there's also the perception issue, given that the reporting on council, I would suggest, is a lot better now than what it might have been 4 years ago. So just a comment.
Harmony makes a big difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Comment.
Sorry, on point 2, should we put result could have not have been achieved without the efforts of the staff and that they also received the results, or that seems a bit messy, and received the results?
Just leave it as it is.
Leave it as it is.
We'll do that anyway.
I think that we voted on it anyway. Yeah, so now we voted on that. Let's move on, councillors, to the second item on the agenda, the returns of interest by councillors and designated staff. And I have some questions about this.
Firstly, do we have a problem with councillors not making proper returns?
No, we don't. If I can just give a background, and Ian, you're welcome to comment as well. This has purely been generated because of the requirements of the Information and Privacy Commissioner, which is requiring the returns of interest from councillors and designated staff now to be published on the internet site. Historically, we've had it here available for inspection, but it hasn't been made publicly available on the website historically. So the Information Commissioner came out with, and it's supported by the Office of Local Government, came out with very clear advice, advising that we now needed to and put it on the website. So this really is advising councillors so that you are aware that your returns of interest are now all required to be placed on the internet or on the website. And we did have a question earlier around property ownership, and could I just note there, and maybe this is worth adding as a note under the recommendation, where we say that the returns of interest by councillors be published on council's website, subject to redaction of personal information. I just need to be clear, so we could add it in a note in brackets afterwards, that redaction of personal information does not include redaction of property ownership.
I'm sorry, why would we want to redact personal information if it's a proper disclosure?
Well,
Just,
Privacy.
I think it's phone numbers and things.
it's normally your phone numbers that you leave.
Look, I
just
agree.
worry when we start to bring in an exclusion.
Well,
I would like to move a
I'm actually
motion that
opposed to what you're suggesting.
I'd be quite happy that
information be available.
I'd be quite happy for you to put a full stop at the end of council's website and get rid of the subject.
I would.
Just delete that subject too.
I would
Because we've all
certainly.
got phone numbers on.
It's all on the website. Anyway.
Yeah. It's
That-
optional though.
And I certainly think our residents have a right to know about the properties that councillors own in the municipality and
It's a
outside.
comprehensive disclosure
Yeah.
that goes to disclosing conflicts of interest. You don't water the stuff.
No, I
Just-
couldn't.
No, I agree. Can we get an example of how it's displayed? So we can at least have a picture of how it's displayed. Is there...
It's basically the PDF of your return of interest. That's
Oh,
it.
okay. Okay.
Oh, okay. So, sorry, does it state like your address, your property that you own?
I just put it up as.
Yeah, just put it up as you sign it.
Yes, it does. It does have your address in, but the trouble is, but even if we were to redact people's personal addresses, if you own your own property, it's going to be listed in the assets that you own, and we're not allowed to redact that. So, and that's what I was going to clarify. So, where people own property, you must declare it in your return of interest, and you cannot redact that component. So it's going to be, if you own your own home and you live in your own home, the property is going to be there anyway. Has to be.
Is it just in North Sydney, or is it all property you have?
No,
Oh,
hold on.
it's all.
Anything that's on your return.
It's all.
Anything that's on your return.
Which has to include properties that you own or have an interest in
Yeah,
outside.
it's all.
Okay.
I think this is a really important one.
There is no qualification. It is a disclosure.
Excellent.
The only thing that's happening here is it's been made more readily accessible.
Yeah, which is a
So it
really
shouldn't
good.
be bringing about any change.
No.
So does somebody want to move that then with
So I
the
think
subject
Councillor
of
Martin moved it and I'll second it. With that, we're going to put a full stop after
website?
Full
website.
stop, yeah. I'm moving.
Yeah. So moved by Councillor Martin, I've seconded. All in favour? So everyone in the room? Good, that's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Now, let's go to GFO 3, and this is the operational plan, quarterly performance review. So January to March 2020. So do we have any discussion, comments?
I can tell you, Mayor, Councillors, an update essentially of where we were at the end of March.
Yeah.
I think it's, I hate to be adding to another good story, but both projects are on track. A couple of projects that have been discontinued for obvious reasons, which I'm on page 3. It's to do with public hidden and also the elections being delayed and the pool being closed. Other than that, I think it's also probably important to note on page 2 the projects where we are with them. The city strategy has gone 55 out of 59. Engineering's on target. Corporate services has got 39 out of 43, with 4 delayed, and engineering is very close, 58, 51.
But you're not alerting us to the limit.
No, it's progressing now.
This is a real good news night. Isn't it?
Nothing more to add.
Who's? Oh, Sarah.
If there's no questions or
Oh, I just want to say it's a really good document,
Yeah.
really well constructed, and well
These
done
are-
to all those involved.
easy to read. Councillor Keane, would you like to move it?
Yeah, I'll move it.
And who would like to second it? Councillor Barber, I think we had his hand up first. So moved by Councillor Keane, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, and all in favour. And that's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor. We now go to GFO4. This is the quarterly budget.
Which may I would ask Darren will take us.
Okay,
through
Darren.
as he did last time.
Yep.
There's a little bit of bad news in this report.
Oh,
damn it!
Sorry to buck the chain.
It's what makes it balance.
At least up to around about the middle of March, when the COVID-19 pandemic, the impact of that really kicked in, operating income and expenditure were both fairly close to budget. There was a drop-off in operating income in the latter half of the month, and we're forecasting that to continue, obviously, for the remainder of the financial year. And we've recommended a number of adjustments. Most of those relate to the drop in revenue for that period. At the end of the September and December quarters, we were predicting a $2.6 million surplus. And with the drop in revenue that we're forecasting between now and the end of June, that surplus is now forecast to become a $3.4 million deficit. So it's a deterioration in the operating result of around $6 million.
Do you have a bit of further deteriorate in the second half of the year?
I personally do, and we're reflecting that in our projections in the draft budget for 2021, and also in the long-term financial plan when we're updating that. Yeah.
You're comfortable that your views have been properly taken into those projections?
Yeah, I am.
This is not a time to sort of overstate or be overconfident.
It's not. It's very much unprecedented, and we really don't know what lies ahead, really. But I think we can be fairly sure there will be ongoing impacts, certainly beyond June 30.
Darren, could I ask if we have any idea how we're comparing to other councils in this area, or is the information too fresh to gauge?
I could possibly make some comment. I think I mentioned to council previously, up until last week, I was having teleconferences with all the general managers from Norsrock 3 mornings a week. We've reduced that, although it'll be 2 mornings this week. And what we're seeing is very similar to what's being experienced in other councils. We're probably slightly more reliant than a number of them on non-rating revenue. As you know, North Sydney's been a relatively low rating council. A lot of that comes back to the timing of freezes before the rate cap got brought in, and we've relied on user fees and charges, and we probably have a more significant commercial property portfolio than some of the other NS Rock councils. So therefore, we take a larger hit. Rates are certainly less susceptible to rapid changes. But the situation is similar. To some extent, we're a little bit more impacted given our higher reliance on non-rating revenues. But essentially, they're all experiencing a similar impact on parking, use of community facilities, recreation facilities, and the like. We're all suffering the same experiences.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So with all that, there's a need to draw down from reserves in a net sense of $18.2 million to keep the budget in balance. And as at June 30 this year, we're forecasting the balance of our cash reserves to be $49.3 million. Roughly 50% of that's externally restricted and the other 50% internally restricted. Capital expenditure, whilst it was fairly close to budget at the end of the March quarter, there's a large amount of money due to be outlaid in the final quarter of the year. And about $28.4 million still to be spent between now, or from the 1st of April to the 30th of June. So I think there's a fair chance there'll be, as was the case last year, around $10 to $12 million worth of works unfinished at the end of June, and we'll need to carry that over into the next financial year. Cash reserves are there to back it up.
I think the important thing on that is that the cash situation at the moment is stable.
It is.
It's just a matter of moving forward, managing that very carefully. So there's a lot of, I guess I'm saying that there's an additional level of management, making sure that the cash flow.
Very unpredictable
We are,
6 months.
but we are aware of that. We have good processes to manage our cash.
I mean, the other good thing is they're called reserves for a reason, and they're there for this reason. So it's good that that's what they're being used for.
Yeah, although just to understand, it's worth it. You're right, that's what the reserves are for, and it says a lot about the need to have them for financial sustainability. But just to understand the size of the impact, if you look at the transfers from reserve previously, there's a significant adjustment in the order of $6.8 million. And when you're looking at $49 million of reserves, of which only approximately half, or 24.5, is not externally constrained, I think you're safe to presume that most of that 6.8 million is actually coming from the unconstrained reserves. So that's the equivalent of a 20% reduction in your unrestrained reserves compared to what we were estimating. So it gives you an idea that it's a significant impact, and if that was to perpetuate throughout next financial year, remember that you suffered this for a quarter, not for a full year, you will suffer it for a full year. By the end of next financial year, we'll be in very significant pain. So it does give you an indication about our need to be vigilant on this over the next 6 months to 12 months.
Can you see we're going to have to change our expenditure programs, how they're described, in the 6 months to manage that back?
Yes. Within the revised budgets, we're already looking at trying to delay or defer some capital works. And I think, Darren, help me out there, but I think we've identified in the order of 5 million, 4.3 or 5.
It's about 3.8.
3.8, around 3 million in delays, which we can do with relatively little pain because of timing. That includes $1 million, I think, from Bradfield Park, which was going to be delayed anyway because of delay in approvals. It includes around 500,000 to 600,000 from not resurfacing North Sydney Oval. One of the benefits of nobody being able to play on the Oval is that we've had a chance to, that with a bit of looking after it, we can make it last a bit longer. And there are other things like that, but that's still a fair way shy of that $6 million change. So we're going to have to be quite careful with our operating costs. If things come back fairly quickly after, say, our budgets are currently being forecast in a continuation of the majority of this behaviour for 6 months through to December. With the easing of restrictions, if they're taken up and we start to see a return of normal behaviour by September, October, then we'll come out of this quite well. But of course, that's to be seen over the next 3 to 6 months. We've got to keep a close eye on it.
I'm told elsewhere that construction costs are currently dropped by about 20%. Are we seeing that in what we're yet to benefit from?
We're yet to see it in actual changes in construction costs. But one of the things I can tell you from the Mannix review of the draft agenda for next week's ordinary meeting, which happened today, is there was feedback from both Rob Emerson and Duncan Mitchell that the response to our tenders is gone up exponentially. So we're seeing a much greater response when we're tendering with the number of tenderers. The indication from their feedback with the industry is other councils are not continuing with their business as normal as much as we are, as far as continuing with our capital program. And of course, there's a significant more interest. I don't know what's happening in the broader non-government sector, but we're definitely getting a lot more tender application submissions.
And would we expect that when we go to tender for the pool?
I would hope so, and that was exactly the comment I made this afternoon.
Okay. Good. So we can.
Well, you know, lots of tenders don't necessarily mean a really good price, but you'd expect that the pencils have to be sharp when you have that number.
That would presumably be a tier 1 or tier 2 builder, and they get
I would
quite
expect so.
hungry up there.
Yeah, so we are seeing it coming. We're starting to see the signs.
That's good.
Actually,
That's
that's
a
where I got the 20% pullback on construction costs at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we get it down there, but the pressure is.
No, yeah.
Down,
No,
down.
that's more good news. Okay.
Well, no, we've got to see it first.
Yeah.
I'm just feeling optimistic tonight. So
That's right.
that's it. Do I have a mover? Unless
No, that's
any more comments, any more questions, councillors? Do I have a mover?
Yes.
Moved by councillor Martin, seconded by
Second.
councillor Brodie, and all in favour? Good, that's unanimous. Everyone's been terribly agreeable tonight. So let's see,
we're on the GF05.
yep, GF05
Financial impacts,
and
which Mayor is
yeah.
continuing on from the GM's comments. GM, you might want to go through this as well, because this is the same flavour, and it's got the attachment at the back with regards to the capital.
For you to lead the process, and I'll add comment when I need to.
Okay, essentially, from what we've just been discussing under the quarterly budget review, and as you're aware from the last council meeting, there was a paper that was delivered there on the impact of COVID. This is, you could say, part 2 of that story. It's seeking a extension, essentially a change to the timetable for the draft operational plan budget, and also seeking to have an additional governance and finance meeting on the 1st of June to consider it. It's to give us really time to have incorporate more information into our budget estimates, and to actually, I guess, consider in greater detail the expenditure side of the story. The first paper that was on COVID spoke mostly to income streams, and it talked about the impact on income streams. There are a lot of, obviously the other side of it is the expenditure impact and the reductions in expenditure, and some also consideration on some of the things, I guess, that are unknown. For instance, rates. We don't know what impact, if any, rate collections will have. There's some information as well. We're still with regards to the funding of the pool, and
We did hear during the GFC there wasn't much of an impact.
yes, we did hear that from Councillor Baker, and we
Oh, was that-
made note of that. Yes.
And if I could just point out there's been some really interesting material. As Margaret just mentioned, the primary purpose of this report and reflects in the recommendations. We are seeking to advise council that we wish to avail ourselves of the amended legislation that the Office of Local Government put out, which allows us to adopt the budgets after going out on public exhibition 1 month later, and that will have an impact on the timing of our rates notices, and our rates will become due a month later as well, and we wish to avail ourselves of that extension in time. The report also it raises a couple of other things, and that the comment I'd just point out from in respect to rates. One of the things I found very interesting in the past week is the Office of Local Government are changing some further resolution, proposing some further changes with regard to councils' capacity to waive rates and then claw back rate increases at a later date, which by and large has been heavily criticised by general managers. So it was an alteration which that proposes to give council the flexibility to defer its rate increases, but doesn't give it any flexibility to increase them in line with IPART's initial rate review recommendations.
So why would we?
Well, we wouldn't, and that's exactly the point. But one of the things that was interesting was that there was an exchange of information for the local government New South Wales, which had, I would say, 80 to 90% of general managers across the state responded. And it gave you a very good indication as to what everyone was doing with their rates. The councils with special rate variations, one of about half a dozen was considering deferring part of their special rate variation increase, but all the rest were keeping to the original special rate variation. So the vast majority of them were keeping to the SVR resolution. None of them were charging below the cap. So all those that may have considered charging a less amount, they were all at least charging the full cap. And the general response was that no one was going to take advantage of the proposed changes to the legislation that the state was looking at putting in place. And the overall emphasis, therefore, to the local government New South Wales was to continue to apply a bit of pressure on the practicality of what the state was proposing to do and to look at flexibility heading in both directions.
We got the variation because of the budgetary position we're in.
Yeah.
Correct.
So why the hell we put ourselves in a worse budgetary position?
Well, we're not proposing to do that. We're not proposing that at all. I was just giving a reflection that nor is anyone else.
Just so you know where I'm coming from.
To give you an idea. There is one part in this paper, though, that I would draw your attention to, and that's in respect to recommendations or considerations, is probably more the point, with the Main Street levy. Can you point out exactly where it is in the paper?
On the top of page 4.
Okay, so one of the things that we're proposing, and I would appreciate your feedback, is there is the opportunity to discontinue the Main Street levies in Crow's Nest and Neutral Bay. That would not have any impact on us financially, and I'd say why is because the way that the rating is done is that the Main Street levies come out of the cap. So when we calculate the rate in the dollar that applies to the business and the residential sector, we look at our total rate cap that we're allowed to, we deduct out the money that's going to be raised by these fixed levies, and then calculate the rate in the dollar on the balance. The proposal, if we discontinued the Main Street levies in Neutral Bay and Crow's Nest, would be to have that revenue still paid to us, but distributed across the entirety of the business sector, not the residential sector, just the business sector, rather than just those businesses in Neutral Bay and Crow's Nest. And part of our logic for that is that effectively will give a little bit of relief and be seen as good news for your small businesses that you tend to get in those areas. That we wouldn't be out of pocket, it would still be paid, but it would effectively transfer a portion of it, and by the time you distribute it across all of them, it'd be a very small portion.
Yeah.
But it distribute it really to some of your larger commercial buildings inside the North Sydney CBD instead of the smaller businesses. So it's a reasonably minor change, but if you look at the distribution of businesses, and remember we only have one commercial business rate,
Then we'd have people in businesses in Neutral Bay and Crows Nest being upset.
No, well,
Subsidising the CBD, whatever.
no. But the subsidy would be going the other way. That the CBD would effectively, instead of the CBD in your big buildings, your one Dennis Street, your Coca-Cola Amatels, etc., will effectively be paying a little bit more to cover off your smaller businesses along Crows Nest and Neutral Bay.
Okay, presenting that seems to be the challenge.
Yeah.
Well, the good news.
I agree.
Well, if we did it, the good news story would be to your Neutral Bay and Crows Nest to say, and my understanding is they've long cried for the Main Street levy to go away, and this would effectively remove it. They'd see that as a small amount.
I think it sounds a reasonable idea.
of
We can help our smaller
relief.
businesses.
How many businesses pay this levy?
Might have to take that one on notice.
Not me.
You don't know off the top of your head. What?
We'd have to take that on notice. I couldn't tell you off the top.
I'm curious to know who was the long cry to get rid of it, because there's always been push to keep it and increase it.
Is that right?
Not from the actual.
No.
Well, from the businesses that do the the street fairs and stuff in Crow's Nest, and they feel an ownership to it because that's what it was
Set up
created
wasn't
for. Those events to support those local businesses, and my feeling of those groups that currently pay it is they feel there is a constant onslaught, and has been for years, from certain councillors who want to remove it and dismantle their parties and fundraising fairs for the local businesses to put their products on display. So I'm a bit confused about where this is coming from, that suddenly everybody wants to get rid of it.
Maybe not a lot of understanding, because I had sort of folklore was that the levy somehow in Crow's Nest meant more money was being spent on the streets of Crow's Nest.
That
may or may not be right.
Well, it partly does that, because it does mean that the amount that we get for the levy is specifically captured to there. And Councillor Barber's right. So the associations might worry about that, because then that provides greater discretion from council into the future as to how much money you allocate there. While as long as you're raising it as a levy, you're then also required to account for it to spend it there, which I think is what you're saying, Steve. But look, it was brought forward to finance as a suggestion. I think it was feedback that we got from rates about some complaints from small businesses, and an idea that was put forward. If you're concerned with it, I would drop the idea and leave it as it is. But it was one thing that was brought forward as a suggestion as to how council could be seen to be supporting small business in particular without taking an impact on its revenues. If it doesn't achieve that, then by all means leave it as it is. And that's why I wanted to raise it as a discussion point, just to see what
I'd have to consider this whole thing a bit more and to talk to some of the business.
So would I.
Crow's Nest.
Okay.
I just can't believe what I'm hearing contradicts the last, 8 years of me being on council in Tunks Ward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, based on that feedback, we'll be very cautious
So we're not
about
opposed
going
to
and
it, we're just reticent about.
and we'll do a little bit more research as to the generation of that idea.
I think so. I mean, I'm happy to change it if I'm the same as the mayor. I just need to sit down and we need to really go through this a bit more.
Okay, that's good
And
feedback.
ask the people, have we run up on Streetscape, the Crow's Nest Streetscape Committee?
No, this is
Sort of looking for ideas.
this is just an internal discussion only at this stage.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's,
I suggest externally we may have different feedback.
Okay.
A bit of brainstorming, that's all.
yeah.
So on that topic, there's also the domestic waste.
Yep.
which there's a proposal here which is just listed under there on the same page to keep the 2021 levy at the same rate as it is at the moment and not to increase it. So, Councillor Mutton.
I want to increase everything. This is not a time for us to give up revenue.
This is
No,
a waste.
and
It's a waste levy.
Yeah, no,
Domestic.
this is
Waste
domestic waste
Management charge.
charge. And look, I'm always the same. I'm inclined to at least put things up by CPI, but
Yeah.
our domestic waste reserve is actually looking very solid. And we're also a bit concerned that if we put the charge up and the reserve creeps up a little bit, we might have trouble justifying it to the auditors.
Correct.
And it
Well,
is,
that's a different issue.
and it is separated. So it might be a good news story for council to keep the domestic waste charge where it is, and mitigate a little bit on growing costs, whilst at the same time, the reality of it as it stands at the moment is there's no real push to move our domestic waste charge up,
The only
given our cost base.
The only thing to note being with so many people working from home over a period of time, obviously there's more residential waste generated. So that
In the building
is
I live
no doubt
in,
coming
we've
back
had a
as a higher.
28% increase in packaging material.
Yeah.
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 So is that
Just
coming into our
extraordinary.
projections? The fact that if for the next however many
No, that's
months,
that's a good point, and no, it hasn't. And the other part of the unknown with domestic waste charge is you'll remember that we finalised a number of our major contracts for domestic waste this financial year, and there's some level of uncertainty that still remains because of the restrictions, the Department of Environment's restrictions on how we treat or reuse waste. So most is going to landfill at the moment. And until we get certainty around the future policies with that could have a further impact on its own industry.
Sorry, is that certainty around future policies as dictated by the government, or are we also investigating assurances from the people we deal with that get rid of it? Because I know Zoe and I were on NESROC when one of the deals was done on waste, and we were very particular about the waste company guaranteeing recycles, and that broke us away from the rest of NESROC and got a better deal. Or we stayed with the deal council had found, North Sydney Council had found, because it was actually a better deal than NESROC went with in the end.
Yeah, no, this is purely government policy, because the government policy at the moment prevents reuse of biodegradables. There's some material that used to be produced, and North Sydney was
We would manufacturing it ourselves.
under that program you're talking about, Councillor Barber. A portion of our we continued to pay a slight premium to reduce the quantum that was going to landfill. That has been ceased under the current policy arrangements, because the Department of Environment is no longer enabling or allowing that manufactured material to be distributed across agricultural land, and that's been subject to review from the department for the last 6 to 12 months.
All right, councillors, so time is it's after
Okay,
half
I
past
remain
7, yeah?
opposed to giving up the revenue.
Okay, so
And we have if we've had any more questions, or we have a motion? Do we have a motion, councillors?
Can I put the motion?
Yeah.
I'm going to just pick up that component that we don't give up the revenue at this stage, which is in recommendation.
well, the honest, I mean, the recommendation there is really to adopt the revised operational plan and budget
we
time
do that, yeah.
and the additional governance and finance committee.
Yeah.
The other material is more for our feedback as we build the budget to bring it back to you. So I'm happy to note and take on board the feedback provided.
It's just that this is the wrong time for us to make any concessions.
I agree. So you moved that
I
way,
move it,
councillor Mutton, and the seconder, councillor Barber. All in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. And that brings us to the end of the committee meeting, and we now have a presentation.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Are they Zooming? What's happening with the presenters?
Yeah, they're doing it remotely.
Yeah, they're doing it remotely, same as the last presentation.